Still not there.
That's the last video.
We're missing the last part.
Those are the page one. We're on, I think we're about to start design.
About to start saying.
Alright, your life.
Okay, let's give it a go here. So we're going to begin Os Zayin altogether. What's the last thing we just spoke about? We answered our We answered our major question, which is, how can we still call this Ani Ladodi if there's so much revelation coming from above? We gave up on the fact that it's just a nasinas koach, like merely an empowerment. We said the faces of the king really indicate that there's a full-blown arousal. How do we nonetheless explain that this is still called an arousal from below, and it's still, the month of Elul is still primarily Ani Ladodi? Who remembers?
Which line?
We're going to start in Oz Zayin.
I don't know if it was the concept that when the king comes into the field, he's a piece of you. So it's this kind of stirs up, your connection to.
Very good. So, because at the end of the day, you yourself are a chelik elukami mal mamish, and no matter how much arousing is going to happen, it's really only getting to reveal the true you, right? That the ani that you have is essentially a lover of God, and all the fireworks and fanfare is really just there to bring out the essential you. Fine. Now we're going to go into Oz Zayin. So we say v'yesh lomar. We can say the al yedei shagila yud gimel midas harachmim oru umagale haratzon pnimid Israel. So by the yud gimel midas harachmim, doing their job of arousing, right, and revealing the inner will of the Jew himself, the ani, the true ani, sharatzon Yisrael belukus, which comes to show us that the desire for godliness inside of every Jew, hu lefishem mushrashim ba'atzmus. Right? Why we have this essential will for God? Because we're rooted in the essence of God. Right? This is our essential self. Like we said, that word Yisrael, right? That the name Kel, which is essentially the name for God, it is God's name, and it's the first of the 13 attributes of mercy. It is ruling inside of us as a natural state of being. So when this happens, and the 13 attributes of mercy arouse us, then this is a kind of a twist in the mimer here. It flips it around, and there becomes an elevation and an advantage to the 13 attributes of mercy themselves. All the time we're trying to figure out if these attributes are arousing us or they're just inspiring us and empowering us. It turns out that really, at the end of the day, they become aroused from us. We're doing the arousing. When you turn the tables, the Jew has this essential desire for God. So we're going to soon see is that all these faces of the king, which we thought were arousing us, really we are amplifying the very nature of the godly light itself. They have an arousal. Ve'inyanu, let's explain. This that we say that the creation is for the Jewish people. Where do we say that the whole creation is for the Jewish people? Where is this first stated? But Bereshis? Where in Bereshis?
So the first word?
The first letter of the Torah. Yeah, the first word, right? Where do we see this? Bereshis, Rashi says, base Reshis, because he explains how the word Bereshis is not really a word. It's screaming out that it needs to be understood. Base Reshis means two things that are called Reshis. What's called Reshis? The Torah is called Reshis Darko. The Jewish people are called Reshis Tivuaso, the beginning of Hashem's crop. So for base Reshis, right? Bara Elokim as Hashemayim v'sa'aretz. For these two things that are called Reshis, Hashem created the whole world. Very nice. So the idea that the whole creation is for the Jewish people, Hakavana b'zeh, he takes it a little bit further. Lo rak lebrias ha'olam el lekol hagiluim. So it's not just that the creation of the actual world was for the Jewish people, but all the giluim also were for the Jewish people. What does all the giluim represent? In other words, what happened before the physical creation? There was Yetzira, Bria, Atzilus. What happened before Atzilus? Before the Tzimtzum, you have the Or Ein Sof, right? So the Or Ein Sof itself, which one could say is just sort of germane to godliness, it's not, right? God is the Ein Sof, and the Or Ein Sof is a light of the Ein Sof that shines off of him. Why does Hashem need a light to shine off him? What is light for, right? It's to bring revelation to whom? For what? So the idea is that even the Or Ein Sof, right, it's not a necessity like the sun that must shine. On the contrary, God could be essentially there without shining. So the fact that he shines, even the original Or Ein Sof, and even though this Or Ein Sof is so high, it's beyond all the worlds, to the point that it has to be contracted if he even wants to make the space for the worlds, nonetheless, all of that is also only for the Bnei Yisrael. So when you say that Bereshis, it really means even the highest level of Giluim is also for Yisrael. Gama Giluim Hachinailim, even the highest levels of Giluim. Sha'al Yidei Yud Rida, the Yud Gim Midas Harachamim Mikoram, that when these descent of the 13 attributes of mercy come out from their source, what's their source? The Heichel Malchuso. We're saying they're called the chamber of the king, the palace of the king, right? When they descend and come down, which the palace of the king is their natural state, l'mayla mishtal shlus, and they descend l'sadeh, they come down to the field, right, into the ishtal shlus, bichdei le'orer legalos ratzo panimi b'Yisrael. We just established the last several classes. Why do they do this? Because they come in order to arouse the essential Jew of a will of a Jew to come out, right? So the whole expression of this light that it descends and shines upon us is for what? We just got through saying, right? So that you are triggered to remember who you really are, your essential Pintele Yid. So, in doing so, Mizgale Behem, it gets revealed to the lights themselves, Shekavana Behem, Hi Bishvil Yisrael. In other words, the lights themselves come to the realization that why are they there? Why is this light shining from God? In the light as it's coming out of the Or Ein Sof, originally before the Tzimtzum, there is such a thing called the Or Ein Sof. I suppose it has some type of a consciousness in its own right, a reason for being, and it's basically thinking it's there because it's just there to reveal God. But and because there's no world yet, right? Its presence is before the Tzimtzum, is before creation. It can't imagine that it's out there for any other reason than just to reveal God to himself, just to bring godliness to a state of shining as opposed to not shining. All of a sudden, when it's sent down to the field, it realizes the purpose that it exists. Because it could ask the same question of itself that we just asked. Why am I here? Why does God need to shine? He's not the sun, but it shines automatically. Why is this light coming out? When it suddenly shines down and realizes its function, which is to shine to the Jewish people and to reveal their essential godliness, who are rooted in the essence, it realizes that its whole purpose is for them. Bishvil Yisrael sheshorsham hu ba'atzmus, right? Because without those divine lights coming and shining to us, we wouldn't realize who we really are. It comes and reminds us that we have essential godliness inside of us. So all of a sudden, when something gets the realization of the purpose for its existence, this is called an elevation in its very state. It has an aliyah from this. And he says, let's connect this to what it says, a pasuk in Koheles that says the king is subject to the field. He's basically enslaved to the field. Simple meaning of that is that you think, of course, the king is nothing greater than him. At the end of the day, even the king is subjugated to the field because he can't live without the lowest level of his kingdom, which is essentially the ground, right? Produces the life force. Shafilu amelech she'ein lamayli mimenu. Even this king, there is no higher level than him. Nevad l'sadeh. He is subjugated to the field. Why? Kimimenu mechayasu. That's how he lives. V'lefi mashakasu b'zohar. According to the Zohar, it gets into this pasuk from Shlomo HaMelech. It says, Man melech da melech ilah. Who is this king that is subjugated to the field that we're talking about in this pasuk? And it explains that it's the higher king, right? Which is basically the Or Ein Sof, like we've been describing, in the Or Ein Sof as it is in its chambers, which is the raw, pure revelation of the Or Ein Sof. And this king, says the Zohar, is chaber l'sadeh, which is subjugated to the field. So what do we learn from here? Not just an earthly king of flesh and blood is subjugated to the field because he has to eat too, but even the higher king, the Or Ein Sof, he's also subjugated to the field. Why? Because he also gets his life force from the field, as it were. If you're putting the pieces together, who's the king? It's the Or Ein Sof, which is, again, it's not really God, it's the shine of the Or Ein Sof that comes off of God. That's what we've been describing this whole time, the 13 attributes of mercy, which is the Or Ein Sof. It's shining from the essence of Hashem. What feeds it, right? What gives it its perfect of existence and allows it to exist? The field, meaning what? The Jews in the field, the fact that it descends to the field and has a function to enliven the Jewish soul and make it realize who it is, it's the only reason for its existence. That's what gives it its life. The Or Ein Sof exists in order to make us realize who we are. And when that happens, that's a pretty kind of a strong statement. And when that happens, the Or Ein Sof has an aliyah. So in other words, not only the Jewish people are not being aroused and affected and sort of dependent on this light, at the end of the day, yes, this light does its job of arousing us, but ultimately, after doing so, it gets an aliyah from us. It's very much like the wedding mimer. We always come back to this, right? That the idea of the man and the woman, the mashpia and the makabel. So at first, the mashpia, he's the big shot. He's coming up and he's revealing himself and he's sort of giving hashpah to this lowly makabel who needs him. Once that happens, it reveals the source of the makabel, right? Which is actually higher than the source of the mashpia. And it says Penei Shabbos. Shabbos refers to the seventh day, refers to the woman. Penei Shabbos, the penimios of Shabbos. Nikabela. What does it mean, nikabela? We will receive. Not only now is there a hashpah coming to Malchus from Zah, but there's a hashpah going into Zah from the source of Malchus. You following this? Because Zah came, this represents the Or Ein Sof, arousing the essence of God, which is inside of the Jew. It's coming to shine and make the Jew realize he has this essence. Suddenly, the Or Ein Sof itself turns around and receives from the source of the Jew, which is rooted in the essence, and therefore the essence amplifies the Or Ein Sof itself, and the Or Ein Sof receives from its hashpah on us, making it realize that it's actually a makabel from us. So what does he say in the Zohar? That even the higher king, so to speak, gets his life force from the field. He's subjugated to the field because he gets his life force, so to speak, from the field, which is his that's when he comes and descends to this field. And who's in the field, by the way? Not the tzaddikim, right? He's going to the lowest Jew, because those are the Jews that need to be reminded of who they are. Because through descending to the field, it reveals the intention of why there's an Or Ein Sof in the first place, right? It's for the Jewish people who are rooted in the Atzmus, right? That this light actually, there's actually sort of a question which is asked in some deep Maimarim. Why does the light really, even to begin with, allow itself to descend into vessels? The nature of light is to be joined to its source. This is essentially the nature of light. In other words, God has in his arsenal sort of two things. He's got lights and vessels. Vessels are a sort of projection of godliness where they don't automatically show any relationship to their source. So this is what we call yesh ma'ayin. He sort of just brings out entities which, when they exist, they show no apparent connection to where they came from. It's like the greatest wonder of Hashem. But light is not a yesh ma'ayin type of situation. Light is an extension of a revelation of where it comes from. When the light comes out, it's showing you at every moment where it comes from. Why? Because it's in a state of devekis. It doesn't want to separate itself from its source. On the contrary, it gets its very existence from the fact that it's clinging to its source and trying to reveal its source. So therefore, the nature of light, like we see sort of the nature of fire, is that it doesn't want to stay on the wick. The nature of light is that it wants to be inside of its source. It's living to connect itself to its source. So the question is, how do you get it to come out? Right? Why in the world would there even be such a thing as like the acceptance of light upon itself to shine? You could say, okay, Hashem's forcing it to come out of but the nature of light is that it doesn't want to come out, and we're not assuming that Hashem is forcing this light to come out. The light is sort of, like any light. It's natural, concept of when you think about light is that it shines. So there's like a contradiction in the very nature of light itself. If it's predicated on wanting to cling to its source, and that's why it's always bound up with its source. We don't see that there's a separation from the light bulb to the beam of light. They're touching each other literally because the light refuses to separate from its source. So why is it shooting out the other way? What gives it this inclination? And the answer is because the light senses the nature of the essence which is uniquely found in the vessel. This notion that the vessel is a yesh me'ayin, like we just said, that what's different than the light in the vessel is that the vessel comes out of the essence in a way where it doesn't have any obvious connection to its source. And yet the essence is also producing it, correct? But it produces the vessels in such a way that the vessels don't show any clear and obvious connection to where they came from. They look totally independent. How do they get such a power of looking totally independent? So he said this and this alone shows on the true nature of the essence of God, because he and only he can create something from nothing mamish. That actually, in order to have something that looks independent from God, this comes from the deepest essential nature of God, because no other entity besides God can actually make something be out of nowhere. So the fact that it looks separate and does not have an obvious connection to its source is itself a symbol and a sort of like a hint that contained inside of it is the very most deepest power of the essence. Because otherwise, how is it sitting there by itself, looking independent? Only essence can produce such a phenomenon. Therefore, what do we see from here? Inside of these vessels, even though they don't have an obvious connection to their source, what's fueling them is nothing other than the very deepest power of the essence itself. The light, therefore, sensing that the vessels contain something higher than them, right? That the vessels are a container of the true essence, whereas the light is just sort of some kind of a shine from the essence. This is what sort of gives the impetus inside of the lights to shine to the vessels. Seemingly, you'd ask, why are you leaving the essence? Why would you go away from your beloved who you're clinging to with your dear life, and you want to be incorporated inside of him and disappear because out of existence due to your bittul to him? What makes you leave and go down to the vessels? And the idea is that ultimately they sense that the vessels contain the essence inside of them, right? The vessels are there, sitting there, because only the essence of Hashem can produce such a thing. Therefore, the essence is specifically inside of the vessels more than the light. And therefore, just like the light wants to cling to its source above, it wants to cling to its source below, because the source of the light is also in the essence which is hidden inside of these vessels. Only what? There's sort of like an advantage for the light to go and find the essence in the vessels as opposed to find the vessels in the essence. Why? Because then it has a job to do. It's then useful to go and reveal, because the function of light is to reveal, correct? So it reveals to these vessels that their true nature is the essence. So it sort of accomplishes both tasks. On one hand, it's shooting and running towards the essence. So it's attaching itself to the essence, but simultaneously it's bringing to light that very vessel is the essence, and therefore it has a utility, it has a function. So it's willing to leave its clingingness inside the essence in order to be useful. It's not leaving the essence, it's going to find the essence down that's in the kli. It's just that by doing that, it also has a function and a purpose, which is to reveal that there's an essence inside the kli. Just like the function of light above is to reveal the essence, so too the function of light, when it touches the vessel, which has the essence inside of it, is to reveal that there's the essence inside of it. And so therefore, it, so to speak, feeds and gets its life force from doing that very task of exiting its source and revealing the essence inside of the yid, the vessel. That was a mouthful, although I enjoyed that mouthful. I don't know if you guys understood what I was saying. I figured I'd go until the end and then see. But there was a lot packed in there. Yeah, you have a question?
Just go back. What is the Zohar saying exactly? This thing about how there's the field of holiness and the field of...
We didn't get to it yet.
Oh, we're not done?
No, we didn't read that yet. But what we just spoke about, did anyone pick up on any of that information? Yes? Okay. So anyway, this is why the light agrees to travel down, seemingly, to something which is far away from the essence, because it's not. It senses that there is essence inside of those vessels. That's how look like vessels, because only the essence can create something from nothing. And therefore, it also finds its functionality and utility because it can now reveal the essence in over there, which anyway was the purpose of light in the first place, to reveal the essence, right? So what does it care if it's revealing the essence on the upper end or on the lower end? And on the contrary, it has a certain advantage to revealing the essence on the lower end, because then it has a usefulness, because it's saying to you, hey, the essence is there and nobody knows about it. I'm going to long for my essence down there, and in doing so, I'm going to reveal to them that they are the essence. And then in doing so, they then show the light its functionality, purpose, and utility, and therefore they increase the level of Or Ein Sof and bump it up to a higher level of Or Ein Sof, because it now knows what it's doing there. It has sort of a intention and kavanah behind it. All right, let's go on to the line that you mentioned. So this is what he says at the period. Al pi ma shekazuf b'Zohar, isadeh ve'isadeh. Right? The Zohar explains there's two levels of fields. It's kind of a famous statement of the Zohar. It says that about a lot of things. There's chesed and there's chesed, right? There's will and there's will. There's many versions of this. And here's the field and there's the field. Sadeh de kedusha v'sadeh de l'umat zeh. You have the field of holiness and you have the field of the other side. V'yesh lomar. Right? What's called the field of holiness? We call it the chakal tapuchin, right? The holy apple orchard. The chakal, which is means the orchard, really means a field, right? So there is the idea of, so to speak, going outside, even in holiness. It's like the idea of like the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, right? Or even like the Chutzos Yerushalayim. In other words, it's not in the temple itself, it's outside, but it's still in holiness. But then there's mamish, the field, right? Outside, kipshuto. The other side, the dark side. The inyan melech l'sadeh ne'avad. And this phrase of Shlomo HaMelech, where we're going to say the king is subservient to the field. He gets his life force from the field. Which means by going down to the field, there becomes an advantage, a life-giving energy, just like a field gives to a king. The king here is the Or Ein Sof, and the Or Ein Sof goes down to the field gives him life. Which field gives the king life, the higher king, the Or Ein Sof? We're going to say mainly the revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy, which are above the Yishtalshlus, which are Bichlalus, is the Indian of Melech Ilah, this higher king, who Gam Yisrael Nimtzayim Bamidbar. This field that these lights are subjected to, are subservient to, is the field of the dark side, which is called the Jews in the desert. In other words, the field of Klippa is the desert, right? Saded Lu'umadze is called the desert. So what we're saying is, where does the Or Ein Sof really get enlivened from, gives it its purpose, and all of a sudden there's a reason to have Or Ein Sof? You would think that's sort of something that you might want anyway. No. The only Bishvil Yisrael, like it says the first base in the Torah, it's there for the Jewish people. Which Jewish people? You might say it's there for the tzaddikim, who represent the Chakal Tapuchin Kadishin, the holy apple orchard. No, says Shlomo Melech. It's in the Zohar. It's the Or Ein Sof gets its life force from the Jews in the desert. It lives to go and shine to specifically those Jews in the desert, because they're the ones who don't realize that the essence of God is inside of them. The Jews that are in the holy field, they have no problem. They don't need the Or Ein Sof to come and remind them, right? They can, so to speak, do without it. But the Jews who are in the desert, who are basically have this Yisrael, the essence of God sitting inside of them, but it got lost, and they don't know they don't know who they are. They're in a desert where God does not dwell. So therefore, there's a reason for the Or Ein Sof to come out. Those Jews, the sinning Jew, gives the life force and the purpose for the whole Or Ein Sof. That's why it lives and exists. Because what's it doing there, the higher king? It's there to reveal the innermost will of a Jew. When it gets nearby, the kale inside of a Jew reminds itself that it's there, and all of a sudden he runs towards God. So the Or Ein Sof has found its purpose. Yotzi mimidbar, and it causes them to suddenly come out of the desert, to come out of the state of yesh me'ayin, which is concealing God, and to reveal the state of Yesh Me'ayin, which is a revelation of Hashem's very essence, that the Yesh itself wants nothing but God, and on the contrary, it is God. Only when it goes to the Sadet Le'umatzeh, the field of Klippa. Right? Now this Jew who comes out from this field of Klippa into the field of Kedusha, he basically does tshuva, turning the page, you have the next page. Lahak bil pnei melech, in order to go now and receive this king. Yeah, Noam.
What does umat mean?
Umat means like opposing. Zeh le'umat zeh asa elokim. It's a pasuk. Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest man, said that everything Hashem made, right? He made it this opposing this. Zeh le'umat zeh. And so since this opposing this represents that which is counter to Kedusha, right? If there's good, there's bad, right? If there's love, there's hate. Everything Hashem created, He created an opposite. So therefore, Chassidus sort of just grabbed that little piece of that sentence and says what's called le'umat zeh, and that's just the name for the dark side. So anytime you see le'umat zeh, it's a quote from this pasuk, which is saying Hashem made everything this opposing this. They leave out the rest of the quote and they just call the dark forces le'umat zeh, opposing this. So you'll see that in hundreds of places. That's kind of what the meaning of it is. Okay, fine. So we're on the final page, top of the line. Everyone with us?
When the world is redeemed, with ordering self have a purpose, when these Jews who are in the Klippa, they're elevated to the field of Kedusha.
Right.
Will ordering self.
It's basically, it will be there to continue to do its job of revealing the essence, right?
But to the people already in Kedusha, already in the field.
Essentially, there won't be any more klippas, right? So, but I guess it can pride itself for eternity, saying that it was responsible for bringing the essence to a state of light, right? So it sort of stays on that level of its reward.
Isn't there a constant revelation of the essence even after?
I don't understand. Say a constant revelation of the essence.
Doesn't it continue to reveal the essence infinitely? Isn't it like
Yes, but again, the geula is a state of essentially perpetual reward for tshuva, right? So, therefore, that which brought us to tshuva, in other words, why does the Jews have such a reward in the world to come? Because we did our job of bringing the world to perfection. So we'll stand there perpetually receiving that reward.
what I'm saying is, isn't there like a perpetual tshuva as well?
Tshuva as well, but not tshuva from sin.
Right, but
Okay.
The Owen Sof has its purpose, just like it did before.
Okay, okay. Maybe you could say that. Yeah, maybe you could say that, sure. Like there's like an ever, since the Orient Sof as its name,
Ein Sof.
yeah, so it is. So then even when everything's good, there's going to be some kind of better, right? In which case, there's a deeper level of the essence that can always be revealed, deeper, deeper, deeper. At some level, though, it could be that those, it just finishes. Like, in other words, if there is a true revelation of the essence, it means it's revealed. So it talks about in the Kuti Torah something like 50,000 yovels. A yovel is 7,000 years, 7 times, and then there's so I mean, it could go on for a long time, but there is some kind of an end, right? Ani rishon, ani achron, umibaladecha and ein elokim. So there's a beginning and there's an end, and the whole middle part is like sort of this endless realms of aliyahs, which we're in the very like early stages of, where there's even still evil. Even after we get to our days of Mashiach and we live 7,000 years, there's going to be 50,000 more cycles like this, all in good. And I guess that is a time of more tshuva, more revelation of the essence, but God can do anything, including reveal Himself in full. So at some point, the purpose of the light will just to actually reveal the full essence, not to bring out sort of like latent parts of the essence that have not yet been revealed. Right, but this is being a standing state of essence revelation. That's seemingly okay. Can someone hand David one of the new copies? Ki al yidei hatshuva d'Yisrael, by the Jewish people doing tshuva, shayu techila b'tachlis harichuk, which it's the Jews in the desert who are to begin with in the furthest state of disconnect, seemingly. Bisgala od yoser penimius to Israel, right? It's specifically to those Jews who are far away, where it's more of a chiddush that you're revealing that really even this Jew loves God, and not only does he love God, his essential nature is the love of God. So when is that sort of exciting? When you're going to bring that to Zuckerberg, right? Or Epstein, right? Like, in other words, Jews who have mamash totally lost the plot. I don't know if you could put those guys in the same sentence exactly, but out there, you know what I'm saying? And if you could somehow bring something to the table which would make them mamash just go 24/7 into a state of Hasidic fervor, that's a bigger chiddush than doing it to you and me, right? Because the further you are away, it's more of a chiddush to realize that all you are is nothing but the love of God. You're just like hiding yourself into this fantasy where you think that you're something else, right? So the idea is, again, where's the life force of this Or Ein Sof really getting its nourishment? It's from the worst, sickest Jews in the world, right? That's what in life, because that's where the tshuva is such a realization. Wow, you really revealed something. I would never have seen that coming, right? So this is when it shows even more that the penimius of the Jewish people, that their ratzonam ha'amiti, their true inner will, gam b'shas hachet, even at the moment of sin, hu be'elokus, it's only in godliness. Rak sheyitzram hu b'tikva. It's just what? So why don't I see it all day long? Because the Yetzer Hara is very, very strong. Hashem hid the essence. It's almost the trademark of the essence is to be hidden, right? If it's truly essence, it means it can't be seen. It's beyond revelation. So it's plunked inside of a yid in such a way that in order to show it, you need mamash to unleash the horses of the Ein Sof, the Or Ein Sof, in order to show that it's actually there. Yeah, Noah.
What's
Tikvam? She tikvam.
Yeah.
Tokef. It comes from the root of that word is tokef, which means strength, and the shin and the mem are grammatical. That it's their strength. Their strength, right? Fine. And then in the brackets he says, Keperush Tzemach Tzedek. This is what the Tzemach Tzedek says on the pasuk, Ki besade matzah kana rav ein moshiela. Last week's parsha, we had some disturbing news there. It says that she was found in the field, the maiden screamed out, and there was no one to save her. So this was Chas v'Shalom, the story of the rape, where the guy gets killed because she was in the field and there was no one that could save her. It says that she was in the city, she also gets killed because she could have screamed out and saved herself. It's obvious that she was in consent with this. But in the field, she wasn't in consent. Even if she screamed out, no one ever heard her, and therefore he gets killed. But we see there's this thing, the sadeh, this little sadeh is coming into the parsha. It's not accidental. All these hints of Elul inside of these parshas of Elul. So he says that she was found in the field. She screamed out, "Ein Moshiach," there's no one to save her. Shagam kishanara. Now who's this maiden? Who's this virgin maiden? It's the neshama, right? He besad de la'umadze. Now unfortunately, this little neshamala, this pure, beautiful neshamala, tahorahi, that was created and from the place of total purity of atzilus, it gets plunked into a body, and it got captured by goyim, and it grows up in a bad neighborhood. So it winds up in the field of darkness. And not only does it wind up in a bad neighborhood, who hangs out in the field? There's a man, right, called Esav, and he has a description of himself in the Torah. He's called Ish Sadeh, right? Esav Ish Sadeh. He was a man of the field. Who's Esav? He's a murderer and a rapist, and he's the Yetzer Hara, right? So when this Chas v'Shalom little neshamala winds up finding herself in the field, she's liable to bump into this Esav, who's the Ish Sadeh. He's the one who hangs out in the field, and on Chas v'Chalila he can grab her and lie with her, right? Which means what? That she's sort of been impregnated or seized by her Yetzer Hara. This is what happens. This is the whole idea of like rape, basically. Chas v'Shalom, the worst possible thing you can do. It's a total takeover against your control and your will of your being. And this is, unfortunately, they equate rape to murder in that pasuk, right? Because the idea is that they're this one and the same. The Yetzer Hara is trying to rape you, it's trying to kill you, it's trying to take away your power, it's trying to take your life force and steal it for itself. And so this is called, where does this happen? It happens in the field. Because Esav, Ish Sadeh is there trying to rape. And this Chas v'Shalom could take place to a neshama. This is called going into gullus, where you're powerless and your own interests cannot be brought forward because someone else is controlling you and putting their interest above yours. And this is what happens anytime a person sins. Your Yetzer Tov is pashit, out of control, being dominated by this horrible Ish Sadeh. So you're in bad shape. Hine gamaz. There's salvation. But no, there's not. It says, Ein Moshiach. There's no salvation. There is salvation, says the Tzemach Tzedek. Az haratzon neshama hu b'kedusha. Even then, when it's busy, this maiden in the field, she doesn't want to be there, right? Her true will is to be with God. It's all comes clear. This was a horrible mistake. This is not me. So ekes b'mar nafsha. This goes back to the Alter Rebbe's Maimer. What happens when you realize where you've been and you start looking for all your deeds in the field? I know it's an extreme case, but every time you do something you're not supposed to do, you're being raped by Esav Ish Sadeh. And you don't want to be there. And all of a sudden, when in the midst of this thing and it's happening and you reflect on it, you cry out bitterly and remind yourself, this is not who I am, this is not where I want to be. And that's what it says. She cries out, but in the Pasuk it says no one listens to her. There's no one there to save her. But the point the Rebbe is trying to make here is that this bitterness of reflecting upon your situation is the natural consequence of being subjugated to this. She cries out over this that he grabs her. She cries out, and then what does it say? Don't read it as Ein Moshiach, but Ayin Moshiach. It's the same letters. Ayin comes to the great Yesh Me'ayin concept, which represents God. That if this soul will cry out, God will save her. What was the whole Maimer about? If you can pull this Rahmanis out of for yourself, if you realize where you are and you have bitterness, or remember you take the second mashal, which is that if you don't feel anything, it's because you're like a severed limb, that a normal person would feel this pain. Why aren't you feeling any pain? Because you're so far gone that you've severed yourself. And if that doesn't work, there's fires, etc. So he said, at some point, you're going to cry out from this bitterness, and you're going to be greeted by Yaakov asher padas Avram. Remember we said? Yaakov, which is mercy that you pull upon yourself, it redeems the Avraham Avinu, the love, the natural love inside of you. And that's what happens if you'll scream out in this situation, Ayin Moshiach. The Ayin will come and save you. This realization of who you really are will come out and make you and enable you to get out of this exile and forced situation to be free. In other words, instead of reading it as there's no salvation, it literally reads the opposite way. There is salvation, and from a very high place, from the state of ayin, which is essentially your kale. It comes, shining forth, and your will of God is now back in control of you.
In the Mashal, it's saying that there is no salvation because no one can hear her. Because no one can hear her in the field, and what we're saying is that no one is basically meaning Hashem.
It doesn't say no one can hear her openly in the pasuk. The pasuk says, "Ki basade matzah tza'aka nara ve'ein Moshiach." And now you read it as ein Moshiach, right, or ayin Moshiach, right? Okay. What's your question?
So basically, the ain is to no one, and
Right.
no one is ayin is basically Hashem.
Right.
So no is basically okay. So we're connected. We're saying that it's Hashem comes to save her.
Yeah. Because she cries out bitterly in this situation, which means she had pulled down Rahmanis on herself and she realized her state of affairs, then she is very much saved. In other words, how do you read it? There's no vows in the Torah. It's coming to tell you. And if she's in a state where she's still in the klippas, Ein Moshiach. But if she cries out bitterly, Ayin Moshiach. The Ayin saves her, right? Which is essentially the Pintel Yid comes out and cannot be overtaken anymore by these thoughts of Le'umat Zeh.
Which Sephira is Kel connected to?
Keser. Keser Elyon. We say Kel Elyon. We actually spoke about this in one of the classes, but I'm going to say it again because I really like this. I found it in the Zohar. It says that, we say Kel Elyon in all davening, right? in the Shemona Esrei. So there's a pasuk that says Adameh le'elyon, right? What does Adameh le'elyon mean? You should resemble Elyon, and this is where the word Adam comes from. That Adam, who basically represents from head to toe, is from Chochmah to Malchus. It's the Seder Ishtalshalus. It's Adameh le'elyon. It's compared, but not on the level of Elyon. And what is Elyon? Kale, Elyon. From here we learn. Kale goes on Keser, and the whole Seder Ishtalshalus is not on that level. It's only compared to it. It's called Adam, and what's above it is called above Adam. Lo yeshev Adam sham. Adam does not dwell there in the positive sense that it's beyond the seichel, it's beyond intelligence, it's like the essence of Hashem. And that kale is hidden deeply inside of the Adam. If you can get your mind and your heart and all your things out of the way, which seem to put you into some kind of limited category, at the core of it, you have this ayin inside of you, which is beyond the yesh. An ayin moshiela. The ayin will burst forth and defy all the foreign intellect and save your soul. Okay.
And I guess the whole process of tshuva is that if you were crying in the moment, then you wouldn't be doing the actual sin, right? It almost feels like when you're involved in doing what you're not supposed to do, at that point you're actually not crying out. You're the opposite.
It's when you cry that you get out of it.
And so after.
But you're in. Why are you crying? Because you're in it.
No, because you did it.
No, it's not. No, you could be crying in the moment, basically, right?
If you're crying in the moment, then you really.
You're getting out of the moment.
It's just that you're not really going to do the sin. It's like the whole thing of the sin is it's a moment of numbness.
I mean, I hate to be, visual and graphic, but think about the situation. She could have gone into the situation, willingly, and she winds up in the midst of this act, realizing, what the heck am I doing here? I am a neshama. And she cries out in the moment, right? And that's how she gets out of the moment. Yeah. Okay. She draws this level of salvation from that which is beyond the ishtalshlus, the level of ayin. After the brackets, and since the innermost will of the Jewish people, because they're rooted in the essence is inside of them, and therefore that's their true nature. Where do you really see this, right? The revelation of this inner nature is most profoundly seen by a Jew who was first in the desert in the Midbar, right? Because when a Jew is acting like a tzaddik, you don't know if his inner nature is truly to love God. It could be just like a well-behaved, person. I can't tell that at your core, all you are is Elokus. The only way I can tell that is if you show no signs externally of being divine. But somehow out of nowhere, like your true inner nature sort of opens itself up and reveals itself. That's how I know that at the core you're a Jew. So you can actually reveal the essence of a non-religious Jew. His essence comes out more than the essence of a religious Jew. Like we find many times it's stated that the power of Mesiras Nefesh, right? We don't find it as much in intellectual Jew, Talmidei Chachamim, right? As we find in like simple Jews. Why? Because the intellect itself, the light of the soul, where you're all realizing there's a God, that actually, in certain sense, clouds over your essential nature. The essential nature that you are willing to do anything for Hashem, no matter what, in a kamikaze reality that your intellect is meaningless. The intellect, if it's shining, it outshines that, and you can't see your core nature. So people who are busy with the intellect, they find it harder to just be Mesiras Nefesh and just throw the intellect away and be killed for the God's cause. You don't find it as much in brainy people as you find it in simple people, because the brains get in the way of the essence. And the same thing is true as here. Like a well-behaved Jew, his well-behaved way, it actually serves to overshadow. We don't know really what's going on in your essential self. What if you suddenly stopped being well-behaved and went off the derech? I have no idea if that was just sort of like a practice that you had, or if that's the real you, because you're busy sort of demonstrating fine quality traits, fine character traits. But if you would suddenly stop, maybe I would just say, you weren't good in the end. You really didn't have it. You were just sort of acting and pretending. But when you find yourself in a state where you're garbage, and suddenly out of nowhere, you just like open up this essential wellspring of goodness, it shows me that really, in the essence, there's an essential goodness there. I can't see it and identify it with someone whose revelations are shining. I can only make out the essence to someone whose revelations are not shining. Then when he suddenly begins to shine, I say, oh, you had something very, very deep contained inside of you. And so therefore the Or Ein Sof knows this. And therefore it's shooting to find the Jew who's in the desert, because that will reveal the essence of the Jew more than shining to the Jews who are not in the desert. Therefore their elevation of the 13 attributes, by descending below to arouse in a man his godliness, is be'ikr. Mainly, this elevation happens by arousing those who were first found in a very, very distant place. So really, the aim of the godliness which is available in this month is specifically for the lowest people. So you shouldn't say, well, Elul's good for, people who really care about God, but I don't know if he's really I'm going to get the king. You're the guy the king is running after. Because his whole purpose is to reveal the essence, and it's not. And he can't reveal the essence as much in someone who's already behaving themselves, because there's too much revelation. I can't get to show how down deep even the rotten Jews are mamash filled with elokus and nothing else. Fine, so we'll have to finish this tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem.